Let's go to another video, but first subscribe and leave a like to strengthen the channel. Now, let's go.
There's a question that most people never ask, but that changes everything when you finally stop to answer it. Why? Even working so much, is there never any money left? You wake up early, stick to your schedule, pay your bills, and still, at the end of the month, your balance is at zero, sometimes below zero. And the worst part, you've been doing this for years. This is not a lack of effort. This is a lack of direction. What you're about to hear is not textbook theory. It is a set of behaviors and decisions that separate those who build wealth from those who merely survive. And the difference between these two groups is not in salary, luck, or inheritance. It is in something much simpler and much more powerful. Here's what no one tells you. Poverty, in most cases, is not a matter of how much you earn. It is a matter of how you think. And when your thinking changes, everything around you begins to change with it. Sounds like an exaggeration? It isn't. People who got out of desperate financial situations did not do it by suddenly earning more money. They did it by changing what they did with the little they had. The big conflict most people face is this. You were taught to work for money, but you were never taught to make money work for you. Since childhood, the message was clear: study, get a job, be responsible. No one mentioned assets. No one explained what an investment is. No one showed the difference between a debt that sinks you and one that pushes you forward. And then you arrive in adulthood with a completely wrong tool to build wealth. The idea that saving a little bit every month is enough and that one day things will get better. But time passes, inflation erodes, unexpected expenses appear, and that little bit never turns into anything real. What we're going to explore here goes against much of what you have learned, and that is exactly why it works. The first thing that needs to be said is that wealth begins in the mind, but not in the vague way you may have heard before. It's not about positive thinking or visualization. It's about practical decisions that come from a different way of seeing money. When you begin to see each $1 not as something to spend, but as a tool that can generate another $1, your financial logic changes completely. This explains something many people notice but cannot understand. Why do certain people, even without high income, accumulate wealth over the years? And why do others, even with considerable salaries, reach their 50s with no savings at all? The answer lies in daily habits, in the small, repeated decisions that no one sees, but that determine where you'll be 10 years from now. And this is exactly the starting point. You do not need a huge salary to begin. You need a method, a consistent behavior, a way of acting that, when practiced every day, makes it almost impossible to remain poor. Before moving on, if what you've heard so far makes sense, it's worth staying on this side. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us in the comments what you think, and which city or country you're watching this from. Knowing where people seeking this change come from is always something that surprises us. The biggest financial mistake that exists is not overspending. It is not knowing where your money goes. Most people have a completely distorted perception of their own expenses. Ask someone how much they spend per month on eating out, on subscriptions they barely use, on impulse purchases. The answer rarely matches reality. And it is exactly this blind spot that prevents any progress. Before talking about investing, before talking about extra income, there is a step that most people skip because it seems too boring: getting to know your own money. Knowing precisely what comes in and what goes out. Not by estimation, by record. Because when you start writing down every expense, something uncomfortable happens. You see yourself making choices that, on paper, make no sense at all. And that is where the conflict deepens. You are not just spending incorrectly. You are spending emotionally. An impulse purchase is not about needing the product. It is about the momentary relief it provides. The expensive dinner on a Friday is not about the food. It is about rewarding a difficult week. The problem is that these rewards have interest, and the interest never shows up at the moment of satisfaction. There is a concept that completely changes your relationship with money when you truly understand it. The difference between an asset and a liability. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. A liability is anything that takes it out. It sounds simple, but most people spend their entire lives accumulating liabilities, thinking they are building wealth. The finance car, the television paid in installments, the phone replaced every year. Each of these is money going out, month after month, without generating anything in return. And while liabilities accumulate, the ability to create assets is gradually suffocated. Not because the income is too low, but because the income is already committed before it even arrives. Here is a figure that few people stop to calculate. If you pay $200 per month in installments for things that have already lost value, that represents $2,400 per year disappearing with no return. In 5 years, that is $12,000. In 10 years, $24,000, not including the interest you paid along the way. That money, directed differently, could be generating passive income. It could be working for you while you sleep. But the problem goes beyond debt. There is another silent enemy of wealth that operates every day without being noticed. Lifestyle inflation. Every time income increases a little, expenses increase along with it, sometimes even more. A salary raise turns into a better car, a bigger apartment, more frequent outings. And the proportion between what comes in and what is left remains the same. Sometimes it gets worse. Those who truly build wealth do the opposite. When income grows, their lifestyle does not keep up at the same pace. The difference between what comes in and what is spent goes straight into assets. It is a discipline that goes against the natural instinct to want to enjoy more when you earn more. But it is exactly this restraint that separates those who accumulate from those who merely circulate money. And here something appears that few people consider. The environment around you directly influences this behavior. It is not judgment, it is observation. When your entire social circle spends impulsively, normalizes debt, and celebrates consumption, it becomes much harder to act differently. Financial social pressure is real and silent. It shows up in the invitation to a dinner above your budget, in comparisons with what others have, in the feeling that saving is deprivation. Breaking away from this requires a conscious decision repeated every single day without exception, not a single dramatic and definitive turning point. A choice made in small, everyday situations, which builds a new and solid pattern over time. It is this consolidated pattern, not a stroke of luck, that generates consistent and lasting wealth. What defines the final outcome is not the point where you are now, but what you decide to do systematically and with discipline from today onward. The moment has arrived when everything said so far converges into a single reality. Most people are not building wealth because they have never truly put their money to work. They are merely transferring money from one place to another, from salary to bills, from bills to consumption, from consumption to zero. And this cycle, repeated month after month, becomes invisible. It feels normal. It feels inevitable. But it is neither. The financial climax of anyone's life happens the moment they realize they can break this cycle, and that the tools to do so already exist, are available, and do not require a millionaire's starting capital. They require method. They require consistency. And they require a change in the order of priorities. The rule that changes everything is simple and brutal at the same time. Pay yourself first. Before bills, before groceries, before any expense, a portion of what you earn goes directly to a destination that works for you, not what is left at the end of the month, because nothing is ever left when there is no intention. The first destination of your money must be your future. This completely changes the logic. Instead of trying to save what remains, you build a structure where investing is mandatory and everything else adapts. It seems difficult at first, but once automated, It stops being a decision that requires willpower and becomes simply the normal functioning of the system. And here is something few people say clearly. You do not need large amounts to start. $50 per month invested consistently for years with compound returns turns into something that defies intuition. Compound interest does not operate in a linear way. It accelerates. The first year seems slow, but from a certain point on, the money your money generates surpasses what you contribute. That is the moment when the game truly changes. But there is a trap along this path that needs to be named clearly: impatience. Most people start, see little result in the first months, and give up. They return old habits, and they lose exactly what matters most in this process: time. Because time is the only ingredient money cannot buy back. Each month of delay in starting an investment has a real, measurable cost that grows silently and relentlessly. Another point that must be faced with absolute honesty is the issue of income sources. Relying on a single source is a huge risk that most people normalize because they have never stopped to calculate the real impact. If that source disappears, and at some point in life this happens with surprising frequency, there's no cushion. The fall is direct. That is why developing a second source of income, even if small at first, structurally changes the financial equation. This second source does not have to be a second job. It can be a monetized skill, a service provided on weekends, a digital product, occasional consulting. What matters is that it exists and that the money generated from it goes entirely into assets, not into increasing your standard of consumption. That is how wealth begins to grow on two fronts at the same time. And when wealth grows consistently, something important changes in the way you make decisions. Financial anxiety gradually decreases. Clarity increases. You begin to say no more easily to unnecessary expenses, to bad opportunities, to external pressures. Financial freedom does not begin when you have a lot of money. It begins when money stops controlling your emotions and your choices. It is at this point that building wealth stops being a daily sacrifice and becomes a natural and continuous process. Not because it has become easy or because circumstances have changed, but because the new pattern is already deeply engrolled. And what once required conscious effort now happens by inertia, the inertia of the right habit, repeated long enough to become part of who you are and how you think. Everything presented so far can be summed up in a truth that is uncomfortable precisely because it is too simple. Being poor, after understanding how wealth works, becomes a choice. Not a conscious choice, made on purpose, but the direct result of continuing to act the old way after having learned that there is another way. And this is the most important point of all this content. The solution to most people's financial problem is not to earn more. It is to intelligently reorganize what already exists. It is to create a system, not to rely on motivation, not to rely on willpower, not to rely on a perfect month where everything goes right. Systems work regardless of how you feel. And it is exactly this that separates those who accumulate wealth from those who merely survive month to month. The first concrete step is to build a solid emergency fund. Before any investment, before any more elaborate strategy, it is necessary to have an amount saved equivalent to at least 3 months of your fixed costs. This money is not meant to generate returns. It is meant to protect. It is what prevents an unforeseen event from destroying everything you are building and forcing you back into debt. Once the reserve is established, the next move is to automate everything. Set a fixed percentage of your income. Even if it's $50, even if it's $100, that automatically goes into an investment as soon as the salary arrives, without passing through your spending account, without depending on an active decision from you at the end of the month. The system does the work, and you simply don't interfere. At the same time, the focus needs to be on continuously learning about money, not passively, listening without purpose, in an applied way. Every new concept you learn about investments, taxes, assets, or the market is a tool that goes directly into your decision making. Those who understand more pay less, earn more, and make fewer mistakes. Financial knowledge has a direct and measurable return. Another habit that builds wealth consistently and quietly is negotiating. Always. Most people accept the first price offered in everything: rent, insurance, credit card bills, recurring services. But those with financial awareness know that almost everything is negotiable, and that a few minutes of conversation can represent hundreds of dollars saved per year. Money that doesn't leave is also money that stays. And here is the moral lesson that runs through all of this from start to finish. Wealth is not a state you reach one day and enjoy forever. It is a behavior you practice every day, in small decisions, in visible renunciations, choices that no one around you notices. The difference between those who have and those who don't is not in talent, luck, or starting point. It is in daily discipline. This means that every day that passes without action is a real cost, not a missed opportunity in the vague sense of the word. A calculable cost in dollars, in time, in future freedom that will not exist if today's actions are not taken. Time works in favor of those who start, and it works against those who wait for the perfect moment to begin, because that moment never comes. The action you need to take now does not need to be big. It needs to be real, and it needs to be today. Open an investment account. Write down last month's expenses. Cancel a subscription you don't use. Research a way to generate extra income with what you already know how to do. Any of these actions, taken now, breaks inertia, and breaking inertia is the most difficult and most decisive step of the entire process. If this content has changed anything about the way you think about money, then it has fulfilled its purpose. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and write in the comments the point that impacted you the most, and from which city or country you are watching. Because building wealth is a solitary decision at first, but becomes much more powerful when done together.